Hi, this is Cal Safkowski for AP Gov 5-Minute Review on the Executive Branch. So where the President derives his or her powers is from Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, and recall that the President is indirectly elected via the Electoral College. It is the only office in which the President is indirectly elected today. And it's important to note that power has significantly increased since the times of the 1930s with FDR and has continued to grow ever since then. And when we're talking about power growing, we're talking about it informally because constitutionally, the president really does not have a ton of power. With respect to amendments in the president, it's important to note these three. The 20th Amendment is the lame duck amendment. And in this amendment, it pushes the president's inauguration from March to January. There's also the 22nd Amendment, which limits the president to 2 terms officially. And then the 25th Amendment, which establishes presidential succession in the event that a president is incapacitated or the president has been assassinated. Now, when you look at the executive branch, it's important to note that it's not just the president, that there are many, many people involved in this particular branch. If you look at the executive office of the president chart right here, you'll see that there are a number of different offices from the National Security Council to the Office of Management and Budget, and you also have the 15 cabinets, which of course are the president's principal advisors on a number of different levels with respect to the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, etc. So you have a number of people in the executive office aside from just the president. Now, when we look at the formal powers of the president, there really are not that many. And when we're talking about formal powers, we're talking about constitutional powers given to the president. And here are a few here on your left, but there aren't many. Probably the most notable formal power is Commander-in-Chief, reporting on State of the Unions, granting pardons, etc. But the president does wear many hats in many respects. If you think about the president is the chief of state, chief executive, chief diplomat with respect to treaties and negotiating peace, commander-in-chief, economic leader, judicial leader, etc. And so the president plays a very, very important role in many, many different arenas. Now, when we talk about informal powers, these are powers that are not necessarily derived from the Constitution, but that the president has assumed, and this has been over the course of history. So when, for example, you look at the president, you might look at the president as a morale builder. After 9/11, George W. Bush was certainly a morale builder. Americans rallied around him, and certainly that showed an informal power of the president. Also, presidents are world leaders. They are budget setters. They are conflict resolvers, crisis managers, etc. So again, the president has many, many roles. Now, with respect to legislation, the president, of course, has veto power, probably one of the more important powers when it comes to legislation. You also have pocket veto. That's an indirect veto where if the president wants a bill to die or the president does not agree with it, then the president will not sign it. Consequently, if Congress is not in session, the bill will die within 10 days. Then you also have a line item veto. This has been ruled unconstitutional where you just basically line item out, cross out what a president does not agree with in a particular bill. However, this is used more at the state level with amongst some governors, but more or less this is not really used that much. Also, the president can bargain with Congress over pieces of legislation that he or she really wants to have passed. And then as a judicial leader, certainly the president is going to appoint people to the federal or Supreme Court based on that person's views on abortion, states' rights, also view on judicial activism versus judicial restraint. Ultimately, a lot of these appointments are going to come down to political help, promotion of the president's philosophy, as well as how that particular judge may be a creator or part of the president's overall legacy in the long term. Now, as the chief diplomat, the president will negotiate with other countries with respect to peace as well as treaties. And of course, that with respect to treaties will have to be ratified by the Senate, 2/3 majority. President also can make executive agreements, but no Senate approval is needed. However, these are not binding. And of course, as the commander-in-chief, probably the most authority in this role. And if you're familiar with the War Powers Resolution as discussed in Unit 1, this has actually never been used. So the commander-in-chief certainly has a major role for the president. And certainly there have been accusations that the presidency today more or less resembles an imperial presidency. That's a result of executive privilege, which is private communication between the president and advisors. This is not supported in the Constitution, but rather by tradition. And it was limited in a Supreme Court case of U.S. v. Nixon, where they ruled during the Watergate scandal that there is no absolute privilege of immunity. Also, you have executive orders, which have the force of law with respect to the Constitution, treaties, and legislative statutes. Again, you do not need the approval of Congress. And of course, these two sources have significantly increased the power of the presidency. And then last but not least, the president, especially during Nixon's presidency, had a past practice of refusing to spend money appropriated by Congress. This will eventually be outlawed by the Impoundment Act. So this is one tiny restriction on the presidency.